In Deepnest's crawling dark, a distant village holds the last survivors of an advanced race. In the haunted kingdom of Pharloom, this race's native realm, footprints of their civilization and their achievements forever mark the landscape. Though they have long since fallen and their line nearly extinct, the whispers of their power still echo. The Weavers of Hollow Knight did great and terrible things, a race of genius that succumbed to tragedy. Where did they come from and where have they gone? In this video, we'll take a closer look at the lore of the Weavers in both Hollow Knight and Silksong. Let's dive in. The Weavers are Hollow Knight's spider kind, a race of highly intelligent and lethal creatures. Weavers are the spider's grace, married to its raw savagery. Though the distant village of Deepnest sports different strains of weaver-like creatures, which we'll discuss in detail later, true weavers are thin frames with bulbous masks. They have 3 pairs of eyes and, it would seem, 4 pairs of legs. Most scuttle on only 6, but from Hera the Beast's resting pose and a few freeze frames in the first Sinner's boss fight, 2 of the 8 are likely hidden close to their mask. When idle, they use their legs as stilts and appear much taller than most other bugs. They also appear to be exclusively female. Every lore tablet left by weavers mentions only sisters as spiders, and we're yet to come across a male weaver, living or dead. This leaves their propagation up to theory, but the silk-spun creature known as Eva tells us, "My mothers shared the curse of their tribe. To conceive a child is a painful, near impossible task." There's immediate evidence, however, that contradicts Eva. Piled high inside the cradle are dozens of empty room cages. Each once held a weaver imprisoned by the citadel. Their markers bear descriptions like weaver in quarter part, weaver in eighth part, and so forth, which suggests several generations of weavers have been born. Perhaps what Eva and the weavers mean is that a pure child, 100% weaver, is almost impossible, which makes sense partly because they're presented as exclusively female. We also know the weavers to assume superiority so they could look upon mixed children as something less than themselves, a genetic blackening of their prized ancestry. Sophistication, refinement, willfulness, all traits that set weavers apart from other races, but their defining ability comes in the weaving and use of silk. As the Materium tells us, silk is fine thread spun from the soul of its creator, highly coveted for its remarkable strength and mystical properties. Used to heal wounds, extend life, and weave powerful runes. Like the pure soul found in the kingdom of Hallownest that acts as life force, energy source, and a potential means of transcendence, silk is versatile. It is soul spun into focus and directed with purpose. From the cross-stitch, rune rage, sharp dart, and other silk skills Hornet acquires while traversing Pharloom, we can intuit the weavers formulated many mystical arts with silk at their center. Not only are weavers more adept at manipulating silk than others, but they are some of the few beings that possess such wells of soul to passively generate silk within their shells. Of silk's myriad uses, the most vital for the weavers and their civilization is packaged in form innocuous, the needle-in. Music is a central theme in Pharloom. We have the citadel of song, we have conductors, reeds, choristers, we have chanting pilgrims, a sonorous cartographer, and dozens of other examples of music's all-encompassing influence. It is melody that preserves Grandmother Silk in slumber and allows Pharloom to continue eternal. Music is captivating, but in Hollow Knight, it's also enthralling. The weavers use their needle-ins to dominate the minds of lesser bugs. Soul is connected to will, to power, and the weavers' mastery of silk allowed them to enslave many of Pharloom's creatures. From the needle-in memory in the ruins of abandoned nameless town we hear, "The weaving ones beckon, sweet promises whispered from depths below, friends seduced, now only the wind." And when Hornet strums her own needle-in, we see haunted enemies momentarily ensnared and calmed. The needle-in draws out through song a bug's inmost thoughts and fervent desires. It opens Pharloom's many secrets. Weavers are predators by nature. They thrill in the hunt, in deception, in laying snares for their prey. When their kingdom rose, they had to curb such appetites. Sister spider, husk bound to branch, watch over these bugs passing safe, warded by fear, no longer your meal. And the dream nail of Deepnest spider tribe speaks of insatiable hunger, a primal drive to feed. So with their abilities touched upon, what of the Weaver's history? What are their origins, and why are they a rarity in both ruined Hallownest and haunted Pharloom? Grandmother Silk, a pale being and a higher being, godlike creatures in the Hollow Knight universe far beyond mortal bugs, is the primal source of silk, the manifestation of this incredible substance. Long ago, she arrived on the boundary of present-day Pharloom and found skittering bugs, base in nature and mindless. All higher beings seem to have an inherent drive to dominate bugs, a desire to have supplicants and devoted worshippers. Grandmother Silk wished for this, and so blessed simple, far-led creatures with her silken power and elevated them in body and spirit, transforming them into the Weavers. She called them her first children and kept hidden both the truth and purpose of their elevation, imprinting within their minds instead the fiction that she directly gave birth to them. For long, the Weavers praised their mother and created a religion that placed her at the center as God. If you'd like to know more about this period, I cover it in depth in my complete Lore of Silksong video, which you can find linked in the description. But at some point, one Weaver broke Grandmother's spell and uncovered the truth of her race's origin. She espoused radical thought and broke from the Weaver's religion. And so she was branded an apostate, the first sinner, and bound in a tortuous prison for eternity. But the damage had been done. Revolutionary thought blazed through the minds of the first children, and as they questioned Grand Silk's motives, a rebellion consumed Pharloom that saw daughters fight against their mother. Remnants of the Weaver's genius can be found in Pharloom's ruined weave nests. Hidden fortresses where the first children fashioned tools, wove runes, and plotted their liberation. Such devices as the snare setter and the silk shot demonstrate technological mastery, and the nests themselves are marvels. Powered by massive silk looms and warded by mystical runes, they are incomparable. The small and large servitors, broken in function, nevertheless show how advanced the Weavers were. Their war with Grandmother Silk led to the Weavers' diaspora, a mass migration of tribes and clans from Pharloom to the world's furthest reaches. It was a promise of freedom and safety from the Pale Monarch that drove many Weavers to forsake their homeland as refugees, exiles. A silk map in Weavenest Syndril details migratory routes. Flee, sisters, flee until your strength exhausts. So far you may escape at last her silken sight, to start anew, to sustain, free of web and service eternal. To the Sandsea wastes they fled, to the Black Barrens and the City of Steel, and also to Hallownest, the kingdom of the Pale Worm. Silksong shows us the origins of the Weavers in Deepnest. Hera the Beast led her brood as war refugees to Hallownest's furthest border, where they carved for themselves a small territory to live independently, free from Grandmother Silk. This marks the divergence of Hallownest's Weavers from those in Pharloom. We'll speak more on Hera's tribe soon. The Weavers who remained won victory against Grandmother Silk. They wove a massive cocoon, no doubt enforced with sealing runes, and placed Grandmother Silk in a slumbering stasis. The Weavers couldn't destroy the pale being, but they rendered her inert. The first children played an enchanting melody on their needle-ends that maintained Mother Silk's repose. Their freedom would last if the silken song continued. But Weaver victory came at great cost. Many lost their lives and countless more fled, which left Pharloom largely depopulated of Weavers. The first children's tenuous grasp was slipping, and those who stayed worked hard to bolster their position and ensure what they sacrificed so much to achieve would stand after their passing. So now, I think it's a good time to look more closely at the lore of the distinct Weaver clans, those who survived in Pharloom, and those who built anew in Hallownest. Similarities persist, but the stories and fates of each are quite different. Devised by your ancestors, that monstrosity, and their wicked, clever minds. A system, or a web they'd likely call it, a way to keep their mother sealed in slumber, and themselves free to lavish in their false rule. This is the harsh, unembellished reality of the Weavers in Pharloom. Many claim Grandmother Silk to be the antagonist of Silksong, and this might be true in one aspect, but the Weavers aren't guiltless and are perhaps viler than the Pale Monarch. The Weavers built the Citadel of Song as both a church and a cage. Through eternal duty and service, the bugs of Pharloom unknowingly maintained the seal on Grandmother Silk's prison. The Weavers hijacked their own religion and claimed the divinity their mother once possessed. Devotion was heaped upon them. Remnants of this idea are preserved in the Citadel's codices. The three factions of conductors, architects, and vault keepers all deferred to the decrees of the first children. We see also the Weaver effigies found throughout Pharloom, small totems used to channel prayer. The Weavers mentioned Atla, Camera, Kilal are ladies over certain aspects of reality, and it would seem Pharloom's bugs prayed to them for protection. Weaver of Pharloom, by grace you warded, by thread you healed, for your favor eternal, we offer our song. This bone-bottom lore tablet offers insight into the Weaver's insidious manipulation of religious thought to ensure an endless supply of labor and voices for Mother Silk's eternal imprisonment. But another lore tablet close by, visible only to the Weavers, reveals grim truth. Watch over these bugs born low, raised up by fervor fostered, born and caught within our web unknowing. And so, for a time, all Pharloom from Moss Grotto to the Pale Lake was bent to the Weaver's will. Beyond the Citadel of Song, the first children satisfied their curiosity by exploring the depths and heights of their realm. Mount Fae, a chilling summit inhospitable to most bugs, excited the Weavers. They wished to communicate with the Faeforn, whose eyrie was nestled at the peak. Using the silk light of Boran servitors to carve passages into the ice, the Weavers constructed an outpost. Sister, Spider, if seeking commune with the creature atop this mount, take the climb above as test, a challenge beyond even our setting. At the top, the Weavers fashioned a tuning fork that resounded their needle in and beckoned the Faeforn creature. To them, it was fickle, offering a boon just as equally as it killed or consumed them. Pharloom's Weavers also conquered in part the blackness of the abyss that lies deep beneath the Earth's strata. Weavenest Absalom was a base used to experiment with and learn from Void, the black substance of the abyss that is a power unto itself, possessing a vague consciousness and a ravenous hunger for soul. So skilled were the Weavers in their rune technology that they managed to capture Void in jars, which we see in Absalom's study chamber. Now, what exactly befell the Weavers of the Abyss isn't quite certain, but the lore tablets left suggest perhaps the Void corrupted their nature and bent their minds to release it upon the surface. In any event, the Weave Nest, like all others, is ruined by the time Hornet arrives. Despite their superiority and their longevity, Weavers weren't immortal. Tied with the fact that reproduction was near impossible, this meant the Weavers would soon go extinct. Pharloom's first children left several things behind as legacy. First was their failed daughter Eva. Eva is a silk-spun creature, a being of divinity mimicked in form too frail. She was intended to be a weapon against Grandmother Silk, but was confined within her iron shell as a fragile being. I've made an in-depth video on Eva's lore, which I'll link in the description, but the Weavers despised their creation and left her to wallow eternally in her cage, placed in Weavenest Atla. The second was the Citadel of Song itself. They prepared as best they could the factions and creations of the Citadel to last through countless generations, the eternal song keeping their hated mother in her cocoon prison. An architect's work owes much to the art of the first children. They set expert standards for the tools and talents of Pharloom Eternal. Sisters, spiders, the burden is past. These simple bugs shall bear it full, never to cease, never to silence. We shall die and wait and pray that one may come of silken strength enough to weave us free. This sentiment, recorded in a rune harp, leads to the third and final legacy. Scattered across the haunted kingdom are several weaver shrines. Large structures unique in architecture and hewn from dark material, untarnished by time's passage. Within each, the essence of a weaver lingers. Their bodies have long decayed, but silk is deeply connected to both soul and memory. By weaving silk epitaphs, the weavers preserve their spirit. When Hornet approaches, each reads, "Daughter of a distant land, we who remained have waited long. Bind our strength to yours, reclaim the future of our haunted kingdom." And if we look closely, we can see that each of these shrines is different, representative of a unique individual weaver. Hornet's presence awakens their waiting spirits, and through her thread, their life might be spun anew. We see this only with the first sinner, however, which might suggest the others were too weak to materialize fully, or that Hornet's crest and aura dominated them, whereas the first sinner is extremely powerful and threatens to overcome Hornet. It could also be that the first sinner's prison prevented her from dying, so she's the only one that's preserved physically. Another interesting piece is that a weaver's harp can be found at the base of many, a type of tombstone maybe, or else a way for their memories to focus. I want to take a moment to discuss Widow, the only other living weaver besides the first sinner found in Pharloom. Widow is a pitiful creature. Her mask was forcibly removed, and pins were lodged in her shell to keep her silk bound useless within. It's assumed by many that Widow is the weaver spoken of in the Cradle lore tablet, who was staked to service after her capture by the Citadel's choristers. Without her mask and her silk, Widow was vulnerable, like Pharloom's other bugs, to Grandmother Silk's haunting that spread as she woke from her slumber. In the cradle, there's a silk memory of Widow strumming the needle in, not to keep the Pale Monarch imprisoned, but rather to rouse her, suggesting her mind's complete corruption. There's an interesting similarity between Widow and First Sinner in their boss fights. Their attacks and movement patterns are shared, the innate strikes and savagery of the Weavers displayed in both their duels. Hera and her brood of weavers who fled Pharloom during the ancient battle against Grandmother Silk arrived at the border of the kingdom of the White Worm. Hallownest at this time might not have reached yet its peak, but the kingdom exerted great influence as it expanded. Already having warred with a pale being, it could be safe to assume the weavers were cautious of the Pale King and fiercely jealous of their hard-won freedom. And so they came to where the pale light couldn't penetrate, to the untamed wilds of Deepnest. Cramped tunnels filled with bizarre predators, Deepnest was inhospitable to all but the most fearsome bugs. The Weaver refugees came into contact with Hallownest's native spider-like beings, a tribe led by the unnamed Lord of Deepnest. Now comes a theory open to conjecture, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments. But I share the interpretation that all the living Spider Tribe members the knight comes across in Deepnest, save the one lone weaver, aren't true weavers. Rather, they are the creations born from the union between Hera and the Lord of Deepnest, or perhaps even the spider kind that followed the Lord before. As mentioned earlier, the weavers share a curse that makes it exceedingly difficult to bear children. Yet the tribe in Deepnest propagated enough that it was necessary to employ a midwife. And though there are some similarities, there are also marked differences in physiology. That we know of, no weaver splits their mask to reveal a horrid face, while the stalking devout's mask appears to be its front appendages, and the midwife also opens her mask to eat. Another interesting point is that masks in Hollow Knight allow a bug to focus, to exist. They offer identity and protect the hidden truth, but masks also come at a price. From the mask maker we hear, the original mind is destroyed, though those of striking will may still retain a sliver of that concealed self. It could be that the weavers demanded or forced the existing brood to don weaver masks, which crushed free will and bound them closer to Hera's kind. While they travel on webs, none of Deepnest's spider tribes seem capable of spinning silk or employing weaver skills, though this could also have been caused by the infection. Our brood is lost to that pestilence of the mind, a sad fall for the most intelligent species. It's important to remember that only the weavers of Pharloom were graced by Grandmother Silk, raised in intellect and power by a higher being. Other spider tribes and spider-like races could very well exist, but would have evolved differently without the light of the Pale Monarch. So it's my thinking that the Lord of Deepnest, who, interestingly, is described as one of the honored caste, which might hint at higher or pale being status, was the leader of Hallownest's native spider tribe. A branching, some might say degenerate, species from the weavers of Pharloom, but similar enough to coexist when Hera arrived with her sisters. Hera, though of a highly intelligent and advanced race, was dubbed the Beast, and she became Queen of Deepnest after union with its lord. From the distant village they ruled over their fearsome realm, weavers and lesser spiders together. From Pharloom, the weavers brought their genius and craft in silk spinning. Amazing things the weavers once crafted on their looms. Stories, shields, spells. So much of our history was spun upon their spools. Throughout the distant village, and especially the weaver's den, we see hung dozens to hundreds of these silk spools, which fueled the kingdom's military and technological might. Deepnest spent much of its arms making incursions into the fungal wastes and warring against the territorial mantis tribes. The mantises were, like the spiders, independent. To maintain a semi-autonomous nature with the kingdom of Hallownest, they agreed to fight the horrors of Deepnest. As this lore tablet reads, "The truce remains, our vigil holds, the beasts are kept at bay." During much of their history, the spiders and beasts of Deepnest took a bloody stance against Hallownest. Besides the heap of corpses stacked at the edge of the mantis village, we see Deepnest's ire in the failed tramway. The tram system was the quintessence of Hallownest's brilliance and might, connecting even the furthest reaches of the kingdom. The Pale King attempted to dig a route through Deepnest, but it ended in failure. The workers were slain by dark denizens, and all endeavors ceased. It couldn't be built. This nest rejects us. It seems, though, a stagway reached the distant village, but even the old stag has no recollection. I have never been to this station. It has a strange air of danger to it. This room inside the distant village has long captivated lore enthusiasts with myriad theories explaining the structure and what it means. Some claim this is either the shrine or the tomb of Deepnest's late lord. And Silksong might offer a little more support to this theory. We see that weavers are skilled in preserving memories and essence within Pharloom's weaver shrines. The architecture and materials of the weaver shrines hearken to this room. I think this could indeed be the Lord of Deepnest's memory and power preserved by Hera's weavers using a familiar method. Perhaps the Lord of Deepnest's essence still lingers to protect and guide his realm. What happened to him is also left to speculation. But there's a cool real-world concept, now largely discredited as myth, that claims most female spiders kill and consume their mate, before, during, or after mating. As the weavers are inspired by real-life spiders, perhaps the fate of Deepnest's lord is born from this myth, though he and Hera never together bore children. It would seem Hera's weavers may also have shrouded their distant village behind a layer of mystical protection. From listening to Brum of the Grim Troop while he's in Deepnest, we hear, "It's not merely by fortune that we meet here, in the darkest, furthest reaches of the world, where my master's scarlet eyes cannot see us." This suggests Grimm, and by extension the higher being known as the Nightmare's Heart, are blind to the happenings of Deepnest. This echoes a lore tablet found in Pharloom's Weavenest Atla. "This low, her gaze escaped. Prepare, sisters, weave hope anew, that we might break free this accursed web, born of our naive foundation." The gaze escaped refers to the higher being, Grandmother Silk, and it can be intuited the Weavenests had warding runes around them to keep them hidden. Both these tidbits continue to illuminate the Weaver's mastery over the mystical arts through their soul-strengthened silk. For some time, the Spider tribe fought savagely for their freedom, but a shared threat united ancient foes. When the Radiance returned in the dream and stirred Bug's minds to frenzy, Hallownest's monarch approached the distant village for aid. As masters of silk and soul, the Weavers produced powerful runes beyond the capabilities of the Pale King's smiths or artificers. He intended to employ their skills to seal the Temple of the Black Egg, the planned chamber where the Hollow Knight would draw the Radiance into its empty shell and imprison her forever. But not even the infection could warm generations of cold feelings, and Hera demanded much in return for the Weaver's service, and her ultimate sacrifice. "For my daughter and my kind, I become bond upon the vessel. Worm, your attempt may prove futile, but your offer I could not refuse. My child, for you I would give it all. For her I would give it all." Hera wished to overcome the Weaver's curse and give birth to a child. The worm was a force powerful enough to break this curse. She and the Pale King had a dalliance that resulted in creation of Hornet. Hera couldn't raise the child, however, as she had promised to become a dreamer, one of the three who vowed to act as a vigilant ward on the Black Egg and preserve the Radiance's prison. It's worth noting that in Hornet's red memory, we see Hera urge her daughter to embrace the pale, divine side of her nature rather than fall in line with the Weaver's dogma. For a race that rarely reproduces, it's bizarre Hera wouldn't want Hornet to inherit the Weaver's mantle. Perhaps she grew jaded with her own kind and found them guilty of their own downfall. Also, the red memory is the oldest image we get of Hera, but even then her own Weaver mask has been replaced by her Dreamer's mask. Hera is unique among Weavers in body shape and in the horns that have passed down to Hornet. Nothing tells us why. My own thought is that childbirth changed her, or maybe as queen she naturally is much larger than other Weavers. But let me know your theories in the comments. On the Silksong subreddit, there's been discussion trying to explain the difference in Hera's appearance. Though the support's flimsy, it's still a thought-provoking analysis, and I recommend you check it out if interested. Now, what Silksong adds to the lore of Hera and the Pale King's union is motivation and reasoning. In Hollow Knight, we weren't explicitly told of a Weaver's difficult conception. Also, more intriguing is that the prison and seal on the Radiance shares vague connection to that of Grandmother Silk. Perhaps the Pale King heard of how the Weavers overcame their monarch and it inspired him to emulation. Neither the Radiance nor Mother Silk are destroyed, but rather bound and inert, and both require an eternal watch to maintain their chains. We see the seal on the Black Egg is the same rune found within this hidden room in Weaver's Den, both woven by the spiders of Pharloom. But the Pale King's late alliance with the Weavers goes beyond imprisoning the Radiance. He marveled at the Spider Tribe's technology and sought to incorporate their genius. From Relic Seeker Lem we hear, "In its declining age, this city switched from stone to parchment, woven of a spider's silk. One of the many wonders produced by Weaver looms." And from Hornet's red memory, during the sequence in the White Palace, we come across wing mold constructs found originally in Hallownest. False fly with a rune-etched shell, a tortured mix of soul and void is caged within. Their lore entry suggests the weavers had a hand in their design, weaving runes at the Pale King's behest. The depths of bond between Hallownest and the distant village can be found within the White Palace, which has, by the time the night arrives, been drawn entirely into the dream realm. But at the entrance to the Path of Pain, a tortuous platforming challenge that hides the memory of the Pale King's shame, that moment in which his paternal love of the Hollow Knight imbued it with something other than void and doomed it to fail, we can find the same style of Weaver rune emblazoned. We've already talked about how Silk connects soul to memory and how the Weavers mastered all three. Perhaps this rune is a Weaver's seal on the Pale King's memory to prevent any from discerning the truth and his guilt. Several Silk spools can be found in the Stagway of Ancient Basin, near the palace grounds, so it seems the Weavers, or at least their skill, was involved in the White Palace. When the Radiance's infection finally consumed Hallownest, the Weavers, whose Queen Hera fell into eternal slumber as a dreamer, decided to flee their new home. Silken charm containing a song of farewell, left by the Weavers who departed Hallownest for their old home. It's cool and telling of how much thought Team Cherry put into this universe to lay the foundation for the Weavers and their focus on song, in this charm 8 years prior. The Weavers that returned likely met a cruel fate, for Pharloom's monarch could have already begun to exert her influence and transform the Citadel. Choristers might have imprisoned them in rune cages, or else they met their death on the journey, for none appear when Hornet comes to Pharloom. And so, the distant village fell silent and abandoned. The crazed skittering of Deepnest's native spider kind continued, but only a few bugs remained with their wits. Hera, who rested and kept sealed the black egg. The lone Weaver, who likely remained to watch over Hera's daughter Hornet, descendant of Worm and Weaver, princess of Hallownest and guardian of its ruins. And the midwife. Base instinct drives the infected spider tribe, as midwife in the Dreamnail dialogue of many deepling brood mention great hunger and a need to kill. Some of these spiders, elevated from base nature, have so returned with the infection, and their civilization has crumbled. Thanks so much for watching this video on the lore of the Weavers in Hollow Knight and Silksong. Let me know your thoughts on Pharloom's Weavers, the spider tribe of Hallownest, what you think happened to the Lord of Deepnest, as well as other characters or stories from Hollow Knight you'd like to learn more about in the comments below. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, be sure to subscribe to the channel where content is uploaded frequently. I want to take a moment to thank all my patrons over on Patreon. Their support means the world to me and helps the channel continue to improve. If you'd like to become a lore luminary for access to me, written scripts, and early video drops, head to patreon.com/thelorebrarians to learn more. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.